Okay, so our story starts out in the total silence of space with a sound. A sound that honestly shouldn't even be possible. For decades, this really bizarre echo coming from the moon had everyone, from top scientists to conspiracy theorists, absolutely captivated. It really kicked off one of the biggest, most persistent mysteries of the entire Apollo era.
And what did it sound like? Well, the mission scientists had this incredible, almost poetic way of describing it. They said the moon rang like a bell. Now, that wasn't just some technical jargon, right? It was their attempt to explain something that seemed totally unbelievable. They had literally hit the moon, and instead of hearing a quick, dull thud like you'd expect, they heard a song, a kind of cosmic hum that just went against everything they thought they knew.
And get this, it wasn't some kind of fluke or a one-time accident. Nope. Starting back in November of '69, NASA started intentionally crashing huge, multi-ton pieces of their spacecraft right into the lunar surface. This happened across 4 different Apollo missions. It was all part of a very deliberate experiment, kind of like trying to listen to the moon's heartbeat. And you know what? Every single time they did it, the results were just as weird.
See, here on Earth, if you have an earthquake or a big impact, you get a quick tremor, right? The energy ripples out, and then it pretty much fades away. But the moon, wow, the moon was completely different. The seismometers they left up there picked up these vibrations that just kept going. We're talking for over an hour in some cases. There weren't any of the usual secondary shock waves, just this long, sustained hum. A really dry, kind of eerie resonance that felt like it was vibrating through the entire moon.
So naturally, this completely bizarre data needed some kind of explanation. And when a clear scientific one didn't immediately pop up, well, a much more sensational idea started to take hold. An idea that suggested our moon wasn't what we thought it was at all.
The thinking went something like this. If the moon rings like a bell, well, maybe it is a bell. This is the core of the hollow moon theory. It basically suggests that our moon isn't a natural satellite at all, but hollow, maybe even artificial, structure. A kind of spaceship moon, just parked in our orbit. So that ringing sound, that wasn't geology, that was engineering.
And you know, the ringing wasn't the only thing fueling this fire. Proponents of the theory had a whole list of other lunar oddities they'd point to. For instance, the fact that it's the exact right size and distance from us to create a perfect solar eclipse, I mean, what are the odds? Then there's its orbit, which is unusually circular for a body that was supposedly captured by Earth's gravity. Its crust is even thicker on one side than the other. Everything from its size to its age just seemed a little off. When you put it all together, it starts to paint this picture of something that wasn't just formed, but was engineered.
And the speculation, well, it got even wilder. There's this one book that proposes the moon isn't just artificial, but that it was deliberately placed here by a, quote, universe-creating agency. The whole purpose? To act as an incubator to help life develop here on Earth. I mean, that is a truly cosmic-level conspiracy theory. But, okay, let's step back for a second. What does the actual science have to say about all this?
Because here's the really cool part. The very same data that starked this whole mystery, it also held the key to solving it. It just, took a few decades and some much newer technology to finally figure out how to listen to it properly.
So on the one hand, you have this really simple, compelling image, right? A hollow metal sphere just ringing like a giant bell in space. But then, on the other hand, you have the scientific reality. And that was a set of really noisy, incredibly complex seismic waves recorded by the Apollo experiments. It was a mess. And that is what the scientists actually had to work with.
The biggest problem they faced was something called coda noise. Now, coda is basically just the tail end of a seismic wave. But on the moon, these codas were super long and ringy because of all the scattering happening in the dry lunar crust. So the very ringing that made the whole thing famous was also acting like static, totally hiding the much more subtle echoes from deep inside the moon that scientists were desperate to find.
So how did they finally get past all that noise? Well, scientists basically took that old Apollo data and applied some seriously cool, modern processing techniques to it. First, they did something called stacking. They took the signals from repeating moonquakes and layered them on top of each other, which made the important part of the signal, the main event, much louder. Then they used this really clever method called polarization filtering to cancel out all that pesky coda noise. You can think of it like noise-canceling headphones for seismic data. And once all that static was gone, boom, something amazing appeared. Faint, hidden echoes coming from the very center of the moon.
And those echoes? Well, they finally revealed the truth. The moon wasn't hollow, not even close. In fact, its interior was way more complex and honestly way more interesting than anyone had ever imagined.
And here it is. This is the scientific model that was built from all that reanalyzed data. As you can see, it's far from being an empty shell. The moon actually has a dense, layered core that's surprisingly similar to Earth's. We're not looking at a hollow sphere, we're looking at a complex, dynamic little world.
So let's break this down. Right at the very center, you've got a solid inner core. Around that, there's a fluid, molten outer core. And then wrapping around that is a boundary layer of partial melt. Basically, the moon has a heart of iron with both solid and liquid parts, just like us.
Okay, so this brings us back to the big question. Why does it ring like a bell? Well, it's because the moon's crust is incredibly dry, cool, and rigid. It's not great at absorbing vibrations. So when it gets hit, the seismic waves travel through that crust and then they bounce off those deep core layers we just looked at. They just get reflected back and forth over and over, which sustains the vibration for a really long time. It's kind of like a tuning fork. So it doesn't ring because it's empty. It rings because its structure makes it a nearly perfect echo chamber.
So we've gone from a strange ringing sound all the way to a pretty profound revelation. It's a journey from a mystery to understanding the secret heart of our closest neighbor in space.
You know, the bell was a really beautiful metaphor, but the reality, this complex, layered world, is I think even more profound. Science didn't just come in and debunk the mystery to spoil everyone's fun. Instead, it replaced a simple, kind of spooky story with a reality that's way more fascinating. The moon isn't some hollow spaceship. It's a complicated world with its entire history written deep down in its core.
And the new discoveries just keep on coming. For instance, this new model suggests the lunar core has less than 6% sulfur. Now you might be thinking, okay, why does that matter? Well, it's actually a huge clue. It's really strong evidence that the moon formed in an incredibly violent, super high temperature event, most likely that giant impact theory we've all heard about. An event so hot that lighter elements, like a lot of the sulfur, were just boiled away into space.
So here's the bottom line. The moon isn't hollow, but man, it is still absolutely full of secrets. It turns out solving the mystery of the ringing bell didn't end the story. It just opened up a whole new set of deeper questions about its fiery birth and how it evolved over billions of years. It really makes you wonder, what else will we hear the next time we really, truly listen?